Recently, I've had several parents tell me their child naps really well on a cot or a mat at daycare. And that leaves them wondering if this is an indication that their little one is ready for a big kid bed or a toddler bed. I thought this could be a great Q&A episode for you all. If your child naps well on a cot or a mat at daycare, does that mean that they will do well sleeping in a big kid bed at home? Hi, I'm Allison, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. I remember when the daycare that my girls attended told me that they were going to shift the girls to different rooms, and in that new room, they would be napping on mats on the floor. Of course, this happened about 18 months apart, but each time I remember thinking, oh my goodness, they're only, they were somewhere between 12 and 18 months, and I was convinced that my girls would not go along with this plan of taking a nap on a mat. But they both did great. And I think it's worth noting, in fact, I think it's a really important point here, that Addison, my oldest, her sleep at that time was a disaster, particularly at home, but it also wasn't even great at daycare. And Ainsley's sleep at home was great when she made that transition, and she was napping well at daycare in the crib. So I had one child go into this really big transition at daycare who wasn't sleeping well in her crib. And I had one shift into this transition who had great sleep habits, both at home and at daycare. So their profiles were very different as they headed into this transition, and they both did amazingly well. I also want to note that I don't have exact numbers, but I'm going to put an estimate that around 85% of the families I work with have their children in daycare. So I hear a lot about daycare sleep and what happens there versus what happens at home. I have only worked with a handful of toddlers who didn't nap pretty well on these mats or cots at daycare, whether they were napping well at home in the crib. It just never ceases to amaze me. Here I am, 10 plus years into parenting and 7 plus years into being a sleep coach. And I am still amazed that these little toddlers, whether they're good sleepers at home or not, seem to nap pretty well on mats and cots at daycare. It kind of seems like the equivalent of them napping in a bed or toddler bed at home, right? There's no crib sides involved. Well, I can tell you with absolute certainty that a child's willingness and ability to nap well out of a crib on, say, a mat or a cot at daycare absolutely does not indicate whether or not they are ready for the transition from a crib to a big kid bed at home. I can also assure you that if your child is struggling with sleep at home in their crib, but napping well on a cot at school, transitioning them to a big kid bed will not, I repeat, will not be the answer to your child's sleep struggles at home. Daycares and schools have so much success with mat and cot naps because there is really clear expectations from the teachers on what is expected of the children in the classroom. There is typically really consistent timing and a consistent process that all of the kids are following. And therefore, there is this peer pressure. Everyone's doing it. It kind of seems like the thing to do. So where sometimes kids have FOMO when they're going to nap at home because they don't want to miss out on something, at daycare or at a preschool, this is what everyone's doing. So they're not missing out on anything. I am convinced that it's this combination of very clear expectations from the teachers and that peer pressure that they don't even realize is happening, that feeling of, well, everyone's doing it, so I guess it's the thing to do, that makes this transition so successful even for kids as young as 12 months. I have a hard time convincing parents of this, though, because I have families that I have previously worked with who come back to me and say, oh, I didn't take your advice. We thought our kiddo was different. I just want to encourage you all to trust me on this advice. I am thrilled that your child is napping well at daycare or napping well at preschool on their mat or the cot. But please do not interpret that as their readiness to move to a big kid bed. I've said it before and I will keep saying it. If you can safely keep your child in the crib, I recommend making the transition to the big kid bed when your child is 3 years old or older. After the age of 3, children have developed more impulse control. And that means that transition is more likely to go smoothly because they actually have the ability, a little more developed, I should say. Even younger kids have this ability, but that ability is stronger to lay in their bed and think, okay, I'm in this dark room. It's my job to stay in this room. Or when they wake up to think, okay, it's still dark. I should go back to sleep. But when they're younger, they're so impulsive that they don't even think through that when they wake up, and they're more likely to hop out of the bed. I personally kept my kids in the crib until their 4th birthday, and their transition into the bed was seamless. I also want to note that I really encourage you to make sure your child has good sleep habits at home in their crib before you make the transition. So as I noted earlier, a lot of parents will make the transition because their child is happily napping at school on a mat or a cot, but not happy sleeping in their crib at home. And so it's really easy to make that leap to think, okay, well, maybe it's just the crib. They don't like the crib and they like to have the freedom of the cot or the mat. Therefore, I bet they'll like to have the freedom of a toddler bed or any sort of bed that's not a crib. And so I totally understand how parents make the leap, but that's not how it works. So even if you're thinking to yourself, well, my child is 3 or older, and that means it is time to make the leap. Nope. I would still encourage you to make sure your child is sleeping well in their crib before you make that transition to the bed. All right, I hope this episode helps some of you avoid a potentially very challenging transition from the crib to the bed. I want that transition to be as smooth as possible. And if we make sure that we don't get confused by the fact that our child naps well on a mat or a cot, and we keep the transition at home in its own little box, we have good sleep habits, we stay in the crib as long as we can, and we plan for that transition, I promise that things will go smoother. And if you're interested in learning how to effectively plan and prepare your child for a smooth transition from the crib and into a bed, I'm actually going to be teaching a live online workshop on August 17th. This is being recorded in 2023. I'll link to the registration page in the show notes. And if you're listening to this after the live class has already been taught, you can also go to the show notes and access a link to the recording of the workshop. So whether you listen to this when it comes out or a year from now, you can still find a way to access this workshop where I will help you prepare for a very smooth transition. All right, I hope to see you back here next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.